On the line right now, BBC World News correspondent Raphael Gellar. Raphael, welcome back to the program.
How you doing, Ari?
Hey, doing great. Now, let's talk about Maccabi Haifa first. They have a new head coach. Their former coach, Stanojevic, he resigned, and they have a new coach. Before we talk about the new coach, I want to know why the previous coach left his job at Maccabi.
Well, basically, the team moved into a new stadium this year, 31,000 seater, one of the nicest stadiums ever built in Israel, if not the nicest stadium, and the team had a pretty high budget. They brought a couple good players from abroad, along with their Serbian manager from abroad, and to put it, in a nice way, they just got off to a very, very bad start. Basically, after getting embarrassed by Beitar Jerusalem, it became very apparent that he was not the right man to lead the team. He actually offered to resign a couple times earlier in the season, and the owner of the team, Yankele Shachar, said, no, we want to keep you. But after this, it became clear they needed new direction, and they decided to stick with an Israeli coach.
All right, let's talk about him, because this gentleman is Avram Grant's former assistant. Bob, we'll talk about what you expect from him and how he's going to coach the team going forward.
Well, last year he had a very good season at Sachin, the team that we've talked about on your show a couple times. And he spent some time, as you said, with Avram Grant. He's known to be a pupil of Avram Grant. He also coached abroad with Grant in Partizan Belgrade. Interesting, the same team that Stojanovic, the manager that you were talking about, came from. So there's an interesting loop there. But he's a very different style manager. He's a very quiet guy. You'll see in the press interviews that he gives, he's very focused on the game. He doesn't ever really make excuses. He doesn't like to blame things on anything. He's just a quiet guy. And as I said, last year he had a very successful year with Bnei Sachin. He led them to the upper playoffs. He's a good manager. He's not necessarily, a sexy big name. There were some rumors that Ronnie Levy was going to come back, and some other big names that have been at the helm of Haifa. But in the end, or maybe even Guy Luzon, who was at Standard Liège earlier this year, bigger names, but they decided to go with the quieter guy, the guy that wasn't in the media. No one saw the appointment coming. And, so far they haven't gotten off to the best start under the new manager.
And right now, Maccabi Haifa is fourth in the standings with 19 points at 15 matches. Raphael, let's talk about Maccabi Tel Aviv winning in the Toto Cup. Can you tell our listeners what exactly is the Toto Cup?
Well, it's kind of a preseason cup that goes into the season. It's kind of like we have obviously the State Cup, which is considered the honorable cup, the respectable cup. A comparison to it would be the FA Cup in England, or the Coupe de France, or Copa del Rey in Spain. It's the main cup. If you win it, you go to Europe. If you win it, it's a big prestige tournament. The Toto tournament is similar to the Capital One Cup in England. It's the second tier cup. A lot of teams sometimes don't play their best lineups. It's nice to win it. It's a trophy. You get to lift a trophy. But it's not the same as winning the FA Cup, the State Cup, the one where you get the cup by the president of Israel, and it's considered a big honor, and it's a hard thing to get, and teams are trying really hard to get it. And you have the competition from second and third tier leagues battling out. And the Toto Cup is just the first division team it's first division teams that are competing against each other. Interesting enough, Maccabi Haifa lost that match with their first manager, Marco Bubu. So, it's been a tough start for Maccabi Haifa. They were expecting to win that game. Maccabi Tel Aviv fielded their second team, really. Ran Zahavi didn't even play at all in the game, wasn't even on the bench. There are a lot of other players that could have played. So, it's a nice trophy, but the Maccabi Tel Aviv didn't even field their best team for it, and they still won. And it just shows kind of the quality. Not to mention when you have a final for a tournament before January, then it's not that big of a deal, because everything usually that's big is towards the end of the season, or at least later in the season.
Now with Maccabi Haifa, as I mentioned, fourth in the standings. So now they have a new coach. Will they have a chance to somehow overtake Maccabi Tel Aviv, or are they too far out at this point?
That's the thing. You hear, anyone who's listening right now to the show, and they hear, oh, okay, they're in fourth place, it can't be that bad. Well, actually, they're wrong, because between fourth place and 14th place, there's only a difference in 8 points, a couple of games, 2.5 games. If you win a couple games, you can you can go to fourth place. If you lose a couple games, you can go to 10th place. Fourth place is not a big deal. It sounds like a big deal, but that's just because the top three are so ahead, 10, 12, 13, 14 points ahead. We're talking about Kiryat Shmona, Hapoel Be'er Sheva, and Maccabi Tel Aviv. And, of course, tonight Maccabi Tel Aviv is playing against Hapoel Be'er Sheva in what's being called the game of the year. But being in fourth place is a big deal. If you can do well in the FA Cup, the state cup here, you can still qualify for Europe. It's also still possible to qualify for Europe if one of the teams in the top three wins the cup. So their journey to qualify for Europe is still alive, and technically their journey for the state cup, the FA Cup, is also still alive. So they have that going. But winning the title is not going to happen. Coming in the top three is also very, very unlikely. So their best hope right now is to try and win the cup, or try and finish in fourth place, and hoping the fourth is enough for them to qualify for the qualification stages of the Europa League.
Again, we're speaking with BBC World News correspondent Raphael Gellar. The last few minutes we have left with you, let's talk about an update of the scandal we broke last week. It again includes a lot of people, a lot of big politicians, but some sports people as well as Avner Kobel, who is involved with the Israel Basketball League. Do we have any extra information and any updates at this point?
To be honest, there hasn't been much that's come out on the sports front. It's still going to take a long time. There's been lots of interesting articles that have been written by basketball journalists about what this really means for the Basketball Association, but nothing groundbreaking, huge reports. The only thing I can maybe think of is there is an interesting article in the sports website One, that was talking about Shimon Mizrahi and the Maccabi Tel Aviv chairman, CEO, whatever you want to call him, role in this scandal. They said he wasn't a part of it, but the article was kind of hinting that he didn't know about it. Also, the article is very unclear. The bottom line is things are very unclear. Things like this, just as it took a year and a half to uncover, it's going to take a long time for everything else to kind of, first of all, be taken off gag order. Second of all, people start to come forward. People start to, put other people under the bus, if you want to use that term. So we're still at the very, very, beginning stages of the investigation, but I think we'll find out a lot more. And I think we're seeing, and forget about the sports part, we're seeing about every day how deep it is in other sects of Israeli society, and how important it is that they figure everything out, and that they do it before the elections start, or before the elections are, that is in March, in the middle of March.
It's incredible. And we talked about this last week, how it affects so many elements of Israeli society, so many political parties, so many financial sectors, and, of course, the sports world. So they called it one of the biggest scandals in Israel's history, and we'll try to keep an eye on it in the future. Raphael, thank you for your time tonight here on Lewis Live. We always appreciate it, and be well. We'll speak with you soon.
Thank you, Yar. Have a very good show, and we'll speak soon.
All right, thanks so much. Raphael Gellar, BBC World News correspondent here on Lewis Live.